We're still getting your reaction on our other top story. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola says an extradition treaty with the United Arab Emirates will come into effect on the 10th of July. This opens the way for the Gupta family to be brought back here in the country to answer to some questions. Now, to get some reaction to that announcement by the Justice Minister, we're joined by Peter Fabricius from the Institute for Security Studies. So thank you very much for your time. Now, firstly, we've heard from a professor of international relations at the University of Pretoria that it depends what's in the treaty for South Africa to actually be able to act on it by the 10th of July. I just want to talk about security in the country and the embarrassment that we've seen in South Africa with, for instance, your Shepherd Bushiri going to Malawi while on trial and a treaty there, but we still haven't seen him come back to the country. What does this say really about security in our country and getting people who should be answering to crimes coming back or staying here?
Yeah, look, I mean, extradition is an extremely difficult legal and political process. That's I think, the message that comes across very clearly. And it came across this morning from the Minister Lamola and Shamila Batoy, the NDPP. You know, both of them basically said the message, I think we're conveying the message, don't hold your breath, that these processes take a while. So the extradition treaty and the mutual legal assistance agreement, which had been passed in 2018 by both countries, now finally been ratified. You know, and that does mean that there's a more of a push to bring back, you know, to extradite the Guptas and also to provide legal information that Batoy said they need, such as like financial records and so on of the Guptas. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen in a hurry. So what happens now is that Interpol, they've got an Interpol red notice, so they can get Interpol to help. Interpol can help, for example, the UAE to locate these people that they want, the Guptas, the two Gupta brothers. Well, I mean, in the future, maybe the others as well. But the two who have been indicted in the meantime in the Estina matter, the Free State dairy matter. But then, so then you have to have a whole legal process by the UAE courts to decide whether they're extraditable, and then you have to have a political decision by the government, the executive of the UAE, to decide whether or not it wants to extradite them. So, you know, nothing compels the UAE to actually hand them over. Even if their courts decide that they are extraditable, the courts don't just decide that you have to extradite them. They just tell you that it's permissible, and then you, as the executive, must decide. So, you know, it could take a while. And it might not happen, actually.
Yes, that's what I was about to ask, actually, in terms of us celebrating after. I mean, for instance, it's taken us so long as a country to be able to get this treaty after the Gupta family left, and it's been quite a number of years since they've been wanted in the country to answer to some questions. So even afterwards, how long will it take?
You know, extradition can take forever. I mean, I don't know. It depends on as I said, I don't know what the precise legal process is in the UAE, to be honest. Minister Lamola pointed out, for example, that here we need a magistrate's court to decide that they're extraditable. You know, we're looking at it. If you look at a process that we've had going with Minister Chang, you know, the former finance minister of Mozambique. He's been sitting in a jail here since the end of 2018, while our government decides whether or not to extradite him. You know, so it's not like we are completely guiltless in this. I mean, I wouldn't want to compare us with the UAE. The UAE, I think, is quite notorious for providing safe haven for people like the Guptas almost like as a business model. You know, I mean, that might be a little bit harsh, but I think that is true. For people and their funds. And so they are particularly adverse, I would say, to cooperating in these matters, which is why it's been 3 years, as Batoy was complaining this morning, since they've, you know, failed to respond to a request for fundamental information about bank statements and so on of the Guptas. So, yeah. We don't know. I mean, the short answer is that it'll, I guess, will take a while. Look, if the UAE government decides for whatever reason that it wants to really get moving. If the political will is there, which is another expression that came up in the press conference this morning, then it could be quite quick. My sense is that their legal processes are not that much of an obstruction to the executive if it really wants to do something.
Is there any particular reason why it took us this long to get to this point?
Yeah, that I think is the absence again of political will. I mean, Betoy made the point that great, we've got these agreements. They've now been ratified, so they are legally enforceable and so on. And the ambassador, the UAE ambassador, told her and Lamola yesterday that there would be more cooperation. But she also pointed out that these treaties were not absolutely necessary for cooperation. If the UAE had wanted to, it could have moved already, at least at the level of providing information. Obviously, the extradition is a slightly different matter because it does require the courts, I guess, in the UAE, as in other countries, to permit a government to extradite somebody. And one can expect that the Guptas would fight this tooth and nail all the way. Yes. So if they are in UAE, which most people presume they are, although they could flee, I guess, ahead of this process. But if they are there, and if they are arrested after cooperation between Interpol and the UAE legal authorities, then the question of extradition arises, and they will undoubtedly fight it tooth and nail.
So we're in for a big fight. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Fabricius. He's from the Institute of Security Studies.